Howdy everyone, welcome to another episode of Devlogs. It's been a while, and for a few reasons. It started with my summer family vacation, but upon getting back, I decided to use my free time to network, apply for jobs, update my resume and portfolio, then participate in game jams. All throughout that, I have made some progress on my senior project, and more importantly, got experience using Wwise with the Unreal Engine. I simply haven't documented this in the series because I felt it would be easy to recap starting my final semester. Back to my senior project. The progress I made is with art assets and a few scripts in Unity. I won't go into detail about the creation of these, at least maybe until later. All I'll say is YouTube is great, and game jams really help with experience. More importantly, I want to get started on the next chapter for the Wwise 201 certification. But before we dive into that, let's clarify what my deliverable is by the end of the semester. Throughout this senior project, me and my professor knew the end goal for this was a moving target. However, one thing was clear, which was that this project is meant to showcase Wwise and make audio programming a more popular subject approached at Shenandoah. Since this is my final semester, the end goal I have settled on is to make a dynamic menu. I cannot make a functioning game by the end of this semester, or at least, that is not my focus since my program revolves around audio. Instead, I was inspired off a video and the Wwise 201 certification to create a dynamic menu. A research paper I've skimmed through talks about music that reacts to changes in a game's state or the player's actions. I was interested in exploring this concept further, though not just musically speaking. Audio, be it music or sound effects, can react to changes in a game's behavior. I want to explore those behavioral changes on the sound effects side a bit more, and still a bit musically. Because of this, and where I'm at with the project, I have shifted my focus to fleshing out the menu for this video game and creating a few scenarios that can best demonstrate the dynamic audio system that I'm going for. Some examples I have in mind is clicking New or Load Game in the menu, and the music will transition from the title theme to a level 1-1 theme. Another example could be hovering or clicking a button in the menu and sounds playing because of those interactions. This is what constitutes dynamic audio and is something the Wwise certification in that video I showed talks about doing. And so my goal at the end of this semester is to have made a title and level theme and some UI sound effects for the menu, and to integrate it all into the Wwise project and create this dynamic soundscape in Unity. All while doing this, I'll be going through each chapter of the certification and getting certified, so let's do this. We are in Lesson 2 and we'll be going over the following: building a layered structure, experimentation with a layered approach, editing clips, configuring subtracks, and building the layered approach to Cube, which, if you forgot, is the game that follows this certification. A layered structure in music means having the varying elements of the theme split up: the bass, melody, harmony, percussion, and possibly more. Now, in the previous video, we mixed up the soundtrack by having variations of the level theme play throughout gameplay. We learned that the music could sequence in unpredictable yet seamless ways, so long as we followed a format that allowed for us to configure that type of sequencing in the project. This time, we'll be messing with the combat music for when the player is engaged in, combat, and seeing how we can mix that up. I'm going to import the music files for this lesson into the project. Since we are sequencing different measures of music in various ways, we want these measures to be in a single segment instead of multiple. To do this, we can click Add Folder instead of Add File, and all that would have to happen on the computer side is that the different tracks that make up a theme would have to be split into separate files and put under a single folder. You'll see this format as I go through the File Explorer and select the folder with all of the music in it. Once the folder has been imported into Wwise, I just have to change the folder from a virtual folder to a music segment, which will then automatically change the tracks from music segments to music tracks. When I click Create, a music segment object is created in the interactive music hierarchy that is the same name as what the folder was named in the File Explorer. I'll expand the music segment so you can see all the tracks. You may realize that each of these tracks represent the tracks in a DAW that the composer creates each separate instrument in. When the project was exported, the composer made sure to leave each track a separate WAV export so that we'd be able to play around in Wwise. And this is something that could become more or less complicated depending on how the composer wants to split up the tracks. Anyways, when clicking on the Combat A music segment, we can pull up the music segment editor view to be able to see all of the music tracks. The lesson advises that we make sure we can see time settings in our property editor, as well as not to enlarge the view too much. I'm going to play through the tracks so you can get an idea for how everything has been split up. The lesson informs us that all of the musical segments are the same tempo and time signature, meaning if I just change the tempo of the Combat A music segment in the property editor, it will apply that tempo to all of its children objects, which are the music tracks. We were given important information earlier in the lesson, which is that each track is 8 measures long. What you may find weird about that statement is that you'll see some of the tracks and points don't match up with measure 8 on the timeline. This is because some tracks have fades that need to taper off, or a track actually ends earlier than 8 measures. This is the case for the bass tracks, and the arpeggio track that has a fade that spans past measure 8. Regardless, it is intended for the transitions to begin after 8 measures of music. None of the 15 tracks have pre-entry content, meaning the green entry cursor can stay at the beginning measure, whereas the exit cursor will get moved to 9. Which represents 8 measures of music and is where the transition can be called. Alright, so now our tracks are ready to be sequenced in cool ways. Remember that a theme such as a combat one is very likely to repeat itself during gameplay, and so being able to mix up how the track behaves and plays music should keep the vibe interesting for the player. I'm going to create a music playlist container as a parent object to the Combat A music segment. which will allow us to begin creating sequencing possibilities. Real quickly, I need to re-input the tempo setting for the playlist container to 138, like we did for the Combat A music segment, since it is the new parent object that affects everything within it. I'm going to drag the Combat A music segment into the music playlist editor and configure the group of tracks within to loop infinitely. When I play the 8 measures of music, it should loop seamlessly since our execute was put at the 8th measure. In a non-tutorial scenario, you'd be visiting the transport control view to play back the music constantly and get a feel for the musical flow. Because of this, you may want to click the pin icon in the transport view so that it is always present. There is a lot going on with everything playing at once, and it was not intended for everything to be playing at once. Having as many elements as we were given was for the purpose of being able to pick and choose as the music replays in different iterations. Next in the lesson showcases the use of the mute and solo button in the Combat A music segments editor. I actually showed this earlier, but the lesson shows a couple more features that help with experimenting with potential combinations. As I click through the different tracks, you'll see me use the mute and solo buttons next to each track, and this will build up over time and can be annoying to disable all the buttons. Rather than click through them all, there is a Reset All button at the top toolbar for both the mute and solo buttons. When I click them, the solo and mute buttons I had clicked will all be reset. If we wanted to add new potential mix-ups for the combat theme, it is possible to import new tracks into the music segment. The lesson has provided some percussive tracks for us to add into the segment, and when I do this, they will be configured properly under the Combat A parent object. The only thing that should be kept in mind for the composer is that these tracks are made with the qualities in mind that match the dynamics of the song, for example, the tempo or the key, potentially. One reason we've added these extra tracks is to demonstrate what to do if the track is significantly shorter and should be looped. This is the case for the tracks I just added. They're 4 measures long and are meant to be loopable during the 8 measure playback. To loop a track, I will go to the clip in the music segment editor and put my cursor on the bottom right of the bar. By dragging it out to the 8th measure, you can see by the dashed line in the middle of the clip where the loop happens, and how the track should repeat seamlessly in the sequence with the rest of the tracks. Looping a track does not increase memory usage, it simply calls the track that you're telling to loop. You can create a loop for more than one clip at a time by dragging your mouse cursor and highlighting tracks, then dragging where you did before to the desired spot on the timeline. When I play the music, you will hear the new percussive element that has been added. Next, we are going to create variations of the arpeggio track at the top of the music segment editor. This time, we don't have extra tracks from the file explorer, so instead, we will be copy-pasting the track to have 3 iterations that we will play with. First, I will right-click the arpeggio track and click Copy. Now that the track is on my clipboard, I can right-click above the track and in the menu that appears, click New Track. This track will appear at the bottom of the editor, and in the Combat A music segment will show up as a red track. This is because we have yet to add our copied music track to it. I'm going to right-click the empty track in the music segment editor, and you will see an option that says Paste Clips at Play Cursor. Make sure the yellow cursor on your timeline is positioned at the beginning, and when I select this option, the track will be pasted at the beginning of our timeline. I'm going to go through this process again and create a track for a third arpeggio track iteration that we will play with. Let's play with arpeggio 2 first. We are going to split and delete parts of the clip. I'm going to position the play cursor at each bar of the clip, right-click, then select Split on Play Cursor. This will create a beginning and end for all 8 measures of the clip. After doing that, I will delete the 2nd, 4th, and 6th measures of the arpeggio 2 clip. An easy way to do this is by holding Control and left-clicking each segment I intend to delete. I'll solo the track and we can take a listen. so the transitions are very sudden. It would sound nicer for these parts of the clips to fade in and out. This is an easy fix. I'm going to drag the handles on both top corners of the clip segments towards the middle, applying a fade in and out for each part. But can it get more interesting? Yes it can. Now, we are going to add filter curves. By clicking the high pass filter button at the top of the music segment editor, an automation line for each clip will appear with control points at the left and right side of all of those clips. The line is currently at the bottom and represents high pass, which are currently set to none. For the Arpeggio 3 track, I'm going to double click the line to add a point and create a peak in the middle. Listen to the effect when I solo it. Very obvious change as we move towards the peak of high pass during the playback, and simply an example of how to further play around with these clips. We now have iterations of the arpeggio. There are also iterations of other elements for the theme. The thing to remember here is that we want these iterations for an element of the music to play one at a time. Up to this point, we've had normal music tracks in Wwise. However, there are 4 types, and the type we'll be using is a random step music track. I first will change the track type of the Arpeggio 1 track to a random step track. Then, we can create a subtrack, meaning our different iterations of the arpeggio clip can fit into one track. I'll right-click the track and click Add Subtrack, and you can see a space has now appeared beneath the arpeggio track for us to put the other iterations in. To the left of the clips is blue coloring within the track, indicating that random selection is enabled and one of the random tracks out of all of them will play. I'm going to create 2 more subtracks so that we have a total of 4, then go to the bottom and transfer the different arpeggio tracks to the top. To do this, I'm going to cut them, which copies both tracks onto the clipboard if I have both selected. Once I have done this, I no longer need the separate tracks because they will be included in the subtracks for random selection. I will hold Shift and left click both tracks to select both at once, then delete them. Moving back to the top, I'm going to place my play cursor at the beginning of the track, select the top track that has the subtracks, then paste clips at the play cursor. Both of them appear in separate subtracks, and we also have an empty track as an option to potentially not play a track at all. When I play the track multiple times, different ones will be selected. If I want to hear a specific track from the randomized options, I can click the F button to the left of the clips, which will force the music container to audition that track upon playing back. Another sequence type we can use is called sequence step. Unlike random step, we can determine the order of tracks played in this mode. We are going to do this for the guitar tracks because the way they have been composed makes it so that it progressively gets more intense, meaning it needs to play in a certain order. When I change my sequence type to sequence step, the track gains a green shade. The way I want the guitar tracks to sequence is for there to be nothing the first 8 measures, then to progress from the lightest to heaviest guitar track. This will require 3 additional subtracks, and once I have the 3 guitar iterations in, I simply need to drag them beneath the empty track so that the empty track is put on top. The top track is what will play first, so this will sequence perfectly. Now that we have musical segments that sequence in cool ways, we can drop the musical playlist container into an event and into a sound bank, then generate it. I can also check the profiler to make sure everything works, and when I feel awesome about it, can generate the sound banks and move over to Cube if I want to test it out. And that concludes Lesson 2. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.